Welcome. Thank you for joining today's event, Meals and Mingling, Networking and Dining Etiquette, sponsored by the Iowa Work-Based Learning Coordinators and hosted by the Iowa Intermediary Network. Today, we're fortunate to have some great panelists with you today. They include Kristen McMains from Central College, Lindsay Adolphs from St. Ambrose University, and Amy Westra from Dordt University. And now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Gina, to get some more specific introductions.
Thank you, Christine. Appreciate the introduction. So we're going to have each of you introduce yourselves a little bit. Tell us about your education, a little bit about your employment history, and maybe where you are today. Everybody loves a good career story. So let's start.
It cut off there. Was it supposed to start with me? So sorry. Okay. I'm Lindsay. I'm the director of the Career Center at St. Ambrose University, and I have quite a long story that I could go into, but I won't bore everyone with my career history. But I grew up in Iowa City. I went to the University of Iowa, so I'm a proud Hawkeye alum, but I was one of those students who had no idea what I wanted to do. I changed my major many, many times, stumbled into the field that I'm in now. And so all of the resources through this network are fantastic to help you not make mistakes that I made. But then I went to Western for my grad work and then have worked at some small private institutions in Iowa. I worked at the University of Iowa for 5 years before I started in this role where I oversee the Career Center here on campus and work with students and employers.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Amy.
Sure. Hi, I'm Amy Westra. I serve in the Career Center at Dordt University in the northwest corner of Iowa. I grew up in Sioux Center and stayed here for, 1 year of college. And then I had transferred out to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and earned my bachelor's degree there in North American Urban Studies. Catch that for not connecting to your current position, right? I'm back in Sioux Center. But anyway, there's a long story there and it's quite interesting and fun to talk about. Anyway, worked in inner city Grand Rapids with kids and families for about 20 years and then went to South Carolina, was at the University of South Carolina and Columbia International University. So that was my beginning in higher ed, and then came home back to Iowa where my heart has always been. So it's good to be here.
It's great to have you back in Iowa, and we hope students hear that message as well. Like, you can try other places, but feel free to come back to Iowa. We like having our native Iowans return. Kristen, absolutely. Give us your story.
Perfect. I'm the Assistant Director of Career and Professional Development here at Central College. I actually have been in my role just a little over a year. I love that everyone's story kind of mirrors each other's. So I come from a small farming family. I was the only one that didn't go into agriculture. I think that has to do with the fact that I put 3 tractors in the ditch and Dad said, you will be going to college. So I was a bit of a college hopper, but landed at Iowa State University and got my degree in child, adult, and family services with a focus on lifespan studies. My thought was I was going to go into geriatrics, and instead I kind of hit the recession and jumped into employability skill development. So I worked in the Des Moines area, especially with employability first, with individuals with intellectual disabilities and challenges, and then got a chance to just work with people all the way from 16 to 80 on kind of employment exploration. Made our way to Southern Iowa as I followed my husband. Recently received my master's degree in business leadership because I think the business side was something that I was lacking, and I have just a passion for leadership and exploration. That's kind of what eventually led me to Central. My first higher ed experience was at Indian Hills Community College in the grant-funded program TRIO, and I loved it, but just kind of felt a calling to utilize my skills in a different way, which landed me in Pella. So I've been here a little over a year, and I'm really enjoying the engagement, the involvement, and the experience in a different environment, because I think it's always important to push yourself to step outside of your comfort zone.
Thanks to all 3 of you for helping us with this session today. And also a shout out to CPI, Career Professionals of Iowa. That's a professional organization that I think we're all familiar with here on this session. And how we networked to get our presenters for today. So let's dive into the topic of networking and dining etiquette. Can you, Kristen, just tell us a little bit, what is networking and why is it important?
So ironically, as a career professional, networking has been a challenging word for me personally. But what I've learned in this industry, we have a remarkable alum who has written a book called The Ties That Bind, Networking or Not Working. And what's really neat about that is he talks about the fact that as he was doing his exploration with what networking was, his dad put it simply as this: it's talking to people. And so networking is really just an opportunity to engage people in learning about what your needs are, what their needs are, understanding and developing relationships and connections. And so a lot of times those conversations that we're having that we don't realize are networking are just that. I got this position in my current role because of networking, even though that was such a challenging dynamic for me. So to me, I think networking is, again, it's having conversations that have meaningful dynamics and understanding how are those going to allow me to navigate my own journey.
That's a fantastic example there. Amy, tell us why it's important to network. Why is that something students should focus on?
Yeah, well, it kind of depends where you're at and what your goals are. But in general, like if we're thinking about the job search in particular, I'd say it's super important because so many of the jobs are in this hidden market we talk about. Up to 80% of jobs are never advertised. So how do you find out about them? By talking with people, by just getting to know them, doing exactly what Kristen was talking about. Just building relationships with people. So partly it's just to get an understanding of what's happening, where the jobs actually are. Certainly networking can help you understand the industry that you're interested in approaching. So if you're thinking about agriculture or education or healthcare, just by getting to know people who are in those fields, you learn a lot about the ins and outs and can help to decide if that's something that might actually fit for you. Or if that's something you might need to, maybe that was someone else's vision for yourself that you need to put aside and figure out where you do want to go. So I think those are two really important reasons why networking is super important, whether you're in high school or college or anytime beyond.
That's a great point Kristen had too. That's how she found her job. So the more people you network with and the more people you know, the more opportunities that you might have. Lindsay, let's dive into dining etiquette. What is dining etiquette?
Sure thing. So I think that at the core of it, it's essentially showcasing that you have good manners and can be polite in a setting where you're eating. Through everything that's happened in the past couple of years, dining etiquette has shifted and changed, and who knows what it'll actually look like when you're sitting down to a meal. But when you're with an employer and they're either taking you out to dinner or someone who you're trying to impress, you want to have good manners. There's a whole lot someone could go into about what fork you use and what knife you use and how it works. But essentially, if you can be polite and chew with your mouth closed and use the proper, like you use a spoon when you should and not slurp your soup, and showcase yourself in a manner that would, if you were eating with someone and trying to showcase that employer and sell something or be the face of an organization, that those manners would be well received and it would make a good impression on others who were with you.
That's a great introduction to that topic. Amy, why is it important to consider dining etiquette if you're a job seeker?
Well, oh my goodness, have you ever sat down with someone who's picking their nose while you're talking with them? It's gross, right? So, I mean, at a very obvious basic level, you, like Lindsay was talking about, you need to showcase your best self and those kinds of things, some of them super obvious like that. Or wearing your napkin like a necktie, probably not appropriate. They're pretty obvious, but there's other things that are not as obvious that are important to know too, that as you are going out to have these meetings with folks, whether it's a networking session or a business lunch, you're representing not just yourself, but any organization that you're going there through. So if it's in more of an interview session, certainly it's about yourself. But if you're at a business dinner, you're representing your company. And you need to make sure that that's a positive reflection of who they are and how they want to be seen out in the community as well.
So maybe not in the last couple years, but my question for you, Kristen, is it common to have food at a business function? And how do you prepare students or help teach them how to interact with people and have food at the same time?
Good question. And you're right, there's kind of a transition, but we've seen recently a transition back into this kind of a process, and that people want to have connections. They want to have interactions. When it comes to business opportunities, we really tell, at least our students at the college level for sure, your interview doesn't end when you're invited out to dinner, right? So it's another opportunity for the employer and the business entities to get to know you and get to know who you are. But another essential part of being an individual is good citizenship. And that means we're going to be engaged and be involved in these community organizations where, guess what? Food is going to be a part of it, because that's how you get people to be there, right? So it's important to understand and know, digging into that there's going to be involvements and pieces where you're going to interact with others and food is involved. You have to go within your comfort zone. I think that's another piece and component, especially with where we are currently as a society and being aware of where you stand. So it is happening again. That's the reality. To one, it is occurring again, and I don't think it will ever go away. Preparing students, a big part of that again is just engaging the conversation and what do you think this interaction is for, right? And being prepared and reminding individuals to be yourself and be comfortable. Do a little bit of brush up. We do a dining etiquette event every year. And what's really neat is we bring in community partners. So we bring in professionals. So it's a cool opportunity for students to not only get networking, right? But also to kind of practice those pieces. And as a professional myself, it's a good reminder on those simple rules that make it comfortable for everybody. So I don't have to worry about like, oh, do I have spinach in my teeth? How do I handle that? So it's occurring again. And preparation just means being aware, talking to people who are your support about, hey, I have this event or this gathering. How do I approach it and prepare for it? What are your thoughts? I think that's a good approach to any of those kind of dynamics.
And take advantage of those opportunities to practice when you have them. It's so great you all offer those interactions. So as great as networking sounds, right? It's scary for a lot of people. Amy, what are some of your best tips for how to engage someone in a conversation or network with them?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to it from the side of being an introvert, because networking is really hard for me. But a couple of things that have helped me is, first, I've learned that I can't let the fact that I'm an introvert be my excuse for not going. I still have to push myself and I have to put myself out there, but I can be in control of how I want to do that and how I'm preparing for that. So it doesn't always have to be, like Kristen was talking about, a networking event, and that's probably where you have a bunch of people mingling around. Sometimes networking can just be one-on-one. And so I need to balance a lot of those opportunities because that large group is where I get all frazzled. But I do really well with the one-on-one interactions. So one thing, another tip that helps me is thinking of what are my kind of icebreaker opening questions going to be. So I go into that having in mind what questions I'm going to ask, probably not about the weather because that's just too boring, but something that opens up the door to talk personally about that person's career journey, where they're at, how they got there, but asking a good question, because then I get to do what is natural to me, and that's listen, as opposed to doing all the talking and feeling like I have to be the extroverted one. So I've learned things that work for me as an introvert to make that happen. And then also making sure that before and after I'm taking care of myself. So again, I know that those types of things really stretch me. So before, I make sure that I've spent some time alone because that's where I fuel up. So it might be listening to music, it might be going, doing an extra hard workout that day, but something that gives me a little energy and life on my personal level before I go out and have to do this. And then same thing when I get home, that I don't have back-to-back things scheduled, that when that event is done, I can go home and totally decompress and take care of myself again, because those things really do take a lot out of me emotionally.
Those are great pointers that I never would have considered. So thank you for sharing those with us. Lindsay, do you have additional networking advice or maybe a different approach? Because there might be different ways to approach networking that we could present to the audience that they might resonate with and would work better for them.
Definitely. So one of the things that is great about being a younger person, so whether you're in high school or maybe you're watching this and you're at the start of your college career, if you can go to an event with maybe your boss or a supervisor or someone who you trust that knows who you are as a person, and go with them, don't follow them around or just tag along, but ask them before you go, could you introduce me to a couple people, and have them be your in and kind of a window into that, because it can be overwhelming to have this big mass of people and you're just supposed to walk up and talk to everybody. So having a buddy that's there with you, especially a supervisor or a boss that would know you and be able to speak really highly of you, can be helpful. But on the flip side, you don't want to just be next to somebody the whole time. It is your chance to showcase who you are. We have a lot of introverts on the call, apparently, because I am one as well when it comes to networking. But one thing I do is set goals. So I don't go in and expect to meet 1,000 people. I would overwhelm me and they wouldn't be genuine connections. One key thing about networking is you want it to be genuine. You don't want to go in and just throw if you had a business card or throw something out to 1,000 people. So I set a goal to meet 2 new people. It seems small, but it makes it achievable for me. And so maybe it's setting a couple goals of, I want to talk to 2 professionals in the field, and you can do that. And it makes it feel a little bit less intimidating when you're walking into that situation.
More great tips. I'm going to throw the same topic over to Kristen for her input as well.
Sorry. That last answer was really solid, and I appreciate, because I think just like Amy input too, the self-care component and piece was really big. And the small tips, I think that has been one of the biggest reflection points for me when it comes to network and talking to students too. And again, I appreciate the identification, right? Networking isn't just large group, but it's also individual interactions and engagements. I think making sure that you are fostering those engagements and opportunities too. So, you set your goals for yourself. Be sure that those are a continuation, right? So networking, when we think about it, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be genuine, right? And then fostering those. So reaching back out to those connections you made maybe in the larger group settings and saying, let's get coffee, or let's just engage and interact. That's something you have to be purposeful about. And it's not always easy. I think what's really neat. So I was just at the dentist's office a few weeks ago, and there was a young lady there who was in high school shadowing. I wouldn't say I'm an introvert, but I'm definitely like the mom style. So I instantly am like, oh, that's wonderful. What high school do you go to? And what are you excited about? Right. And then talking to her about what a cool opportunity this is to network in an office setting and continue to foster that. Right. If you really enjoy that engagement, or if you don't enjoy that engagement, how can I continue to develop that relationship? Is just a big component to that. So this has been really good, because being on the panel has also been a good cue for me for reminders in those pieces. But that's what I would say is fostering that continued component in relationships is really key.
That's a great point too, to just in every opportunity you have, take advantage or recognize at least that networking opportunity exists. Because I think a lot of students who might be watching this are engaged in work-based learning, like that job shadow that student was doing. But do you think to get that business card and send them a follow-up email and those sorts of things and try to maintain that connection? Can
I jump in one more?
Yes,
send a
please.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do the thank you, like those personal touches. And we really encourage students, and I'm big on handwritten notes. And so if you can do something that's handwritten, that's a huge touch. If not, and email's been the primary communication, do that. But that thank you is huge. Thank you for your time, right? That means a lot. And if that becomes practice early on at the high school level, I think that's where I really learned it, because my mom was really engaged with you need to be thankful and grateful. Then it becomes normal practice, and you'd be surprised at how many professionals go, I really appreciated that touch. That was huge. So again, continuing to foster and sending the thank you.
I'll bet we all have handwritten notes in our offices that we hang on to for potentially ever, right? I see lots of head nods. I know I do that because it does. It sends a meaningful message, and it's so great for the receiver and the person who sent it. So, all right. So you kind of brought up another topic, Kristen, and I'm going to stay with you to start this topic. What about using social media to network professionally? Thoughts on that?
It's a hot topic, right? Because we are in the era of technology. We're in the era of constantly being connected. So I think it's a really great tool if you use it and leverage it correctly, right? I think number one is personal branding. So you need to be sure that you're creating a personal brand that's consistent, that's authentic, that's professional. So be aware of your social media posts. I think younger generations today are far better than even my generation. I remember sitting in classes and being told, make sure your email address is appropriate. Make sure you've gone through your Facebook and nowadays it's Twitter and TikTok, right? So just knowing that whatever message you want to put out there, you're branding yourself. And so that's important to be aware. Understand the tools and be engaged in learning how to use them correctly and appropriately. We really encourage LinkedIn as a professional kind of arena, right? To create connections, to foster them, to ask questions. And having that little piece to the puzzle really helps to open some doors. It's really easy to reach out maybe to a professional or an alum or someone who attends a college if you're exploring college or a technical program and say, hey, tell me about what you do and how you do it. But remember, again, you're creating a personal brand. So leverage the tools, understand them as tools for sure, right? That's not the only way we should connect or network or build relationships, but it's a really good starting point for sure. And gosh, I find a lot of tips and tricks off of my social media pieces because I have crafted kind of the people that I want to be in that professional circle in a really purposeful way, right? And that takes time, that takes practice. But again, personal branding, understanding how to use social media as a tool, and then continuing to craft and kind of foster networking beyond social media, I think are really important elements to that.
Absolutely. Lindsay, I'm sure you work with a lot of employers. What's their side of using social media to engage with networking? Do they want to hear from students? Do they not want to? Is that overwhelming? Do you have any perspective on that?
Yes, right now they want to hear from you. We're in a season of time where especially people who are looking for even just part-time roles, entry-level roles, employers want to connect and engage with students, but it is on a more professional side of the social media sites. So I would echo what Kristen said about LinkedIn. We see a lot of employers who are starting to use LinkedIn, but they're also starting to reach out on Facebook and other ways. So in the search, if you are reaching out to them, if you were to email them or apply for a job, they might Google you. So that's something too, just to know if you're ever curious of, I don't even know what my social brand is or what's out there. I know that I'm on all these things. Google yourself. And that's probably what the employer is going to do first. They might not have a super sleuth that's in their office that's going to go down rabbit holes. They might. I'm one of those people in my office. I could go down a rabbit hole on social media for an hour and find you. I'm not proud of that, but I also kind of am. But they're probably just going to Google you to initially see what's out there. And so that's one really good way to just gauge it initially and to check it out. And so, but they do, and they want to engage. And if you are on LinkedIn, that is a great place to be, and they most likely probably will reach out to you there.
That's great advice. And if we ever need to find anyone, we know who to ask. Amy, what kind of training or how do you help students get started so they have a professional social media presence, or what recommendations do you have for that?
Yeah, LinkedIn really is the place to be for the professional social networking. And I think that's a distinction, just making sure that you keep your personal and your professionals as separate as you can online. So I'm not going to post about my kids or my parents or any of that kind of stuff on LinkedIn, because that's not the purpose for it. I'm going to keep that for Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. But my LinkedIn is going to be about where I want to grow professionally and networking with people who are in my field. So I think that's just important as you're starting out, to be clear about what the different technologies are for and use them appropriately. On LinkedIn, I always tell my students, if you're going to be on there, which you should, you have to make sure that your profile is complete. And that means more than just your name, what school you attend, high school or college, and the interest is going to just naturally pop up as whatever school you're a part of, kind of a thing. So if you're going to be on it, you have to have a full profile. And that means clicking, it's one little button. It's what is it called? Do you guys remember? Add section, I think is what it's called. You want that button is your friend. Add sections. And put in your experience, put in, even if it's very limited, doesn't matter. Make sure that it is complete. Interest is a fabulous category on there to network with all kinds of organizations, businesses, individuals, influencers, and then all of their stuff starts curating into your feed, and you learn so much about the various industries by just simply filling out that piece about interests as fully as possible. So that's one of my top tips. Make sure that that is done well. And then definitely contact recruiters, reach out to people, send DMs through LinkedIn. People do want to hear from you, and they want to be engaging with up and coming talent in their fields.
Excellent. Well, our time is coming to an end, unfortunately. This is such a great topic, and I think we could visit about it much longer. I do want to give everyone the opportunity to give just some final pointers and tips for students who are embarking upon their professional lives. What are your recommendations and big wins for them as they look toward their futures? Amy, let's stay with you.
Okay. I think as you're starting out, number one, be true to yourself. Know who you are, understand what you want to project to people and what your purposes are, but know yourself. That is absolutely essential, really, for the rest of your life. But a second piece to flow out of that is don't overcomplicate networking. It is not. Don't let the pressure fall on you. It's really not that hard. It's simply just getting to know people. You can get to know your friends. You get to know your friends' parents. You get to know your parents' friends. All of those, your family, boyfriends, girlfriends, coworkers, all of those people are potential people for your network. And they're people that you touch every single day. So don't overcomplicate it by thinking it's this big, scary thing when it really doesn't have to be.
Both fantastic tips. Kristen, do you have things to add?
I would definitely mirror that. Be authentic. Be you. That's a key component, right? And I think it's challenging, especially in your young professional career, as you're trying to learn and navigate and understand. Sometimes you can feel like a chameleon because you don't know where you're supposed to land. But be authentic and follow up a yes with the action. Right? So if someone asks you to go participate in something, or you see something posted, an event, a book club, a networking dinner, a community engagement, Rotary, anything like that, commit to one, right? And say yes, and then follow it up with action. I think that's key, is putting yourself out there, being authentic, but follow the yes with the action. I think that's important.
Another great tip. Lindsay, we're going to wrap it up with you. Give us your best advice.
Sure. I would echo everything that's been said. And then just don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask to go with someone to something or ask for help. And then don't be afraid to offer help and sell yourself short. You'd be surprised how much you have as a young person to offer people who've been in the field forever. And a lot of times it can be really easy to think, well, I don't know anything, or I'm new, so I'm just going to listen, or maybe they're just here to help me. But you can help people too. And a lot of networking is building relationships and helping other people. And then that in turn will end up helping you do something. But just don't sell yourself short. You have a lot to offer when you go into these settings. And so be confident when you're talking with everyone. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. People who've been in careers forever love to help and love to give back. And we want you to ask us all of the questions. And so don't be afraid to do that either.
Absolutely. And if anyone is interested in what any of our panelists do, I'm sure they would be happy to field some questions for you. All right. Well, thank you for joining us to add to the conversation kind of from the community college perspective, although it's probably not different when it comes to this topic. But we want to make sure to include our community college partners. So just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your career journey, if you would, please.
Yes, sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Gina, for thinking of us as a community college and career services office and a community college. And also for thinking of me. I appreciate that. I appreciate you inviting me for this conversation. A little bit about myself. First of all, I am currently the assistant coordinator for the Career Services Center at Hawkeye Community College. My name is Yusuf Mikawi. I should have started with this. But anyhow, a little bit about my journey in career services. It started, it's a long journey. I'm going to try to kind of make it short as possible. I grew up in Egypt actually most of my life. And part of my university where I was at, Al-Azhar University, is actually one of the oldest universities in the world, in the early 1900s, actually, where it started. So there was no career services office. I was at Faculty of Languages and Translation. Me and a few of my students started a student organization called Spread Your Skills. And this organization was actually aiming at increasing, helping students increase their skills, their competencies that's needed in the workforce. So we used to give courses in English. We used to bring in speakers and leaders and recruiters to tell students and give workshops about resumes, cover letters, interviewing skills, all that fun stuff. And basically this is where the dream started. Then I got a scholarship to study here in the US at North Central College, which is a small college in the suburbs of Chicago. That's where I got my human resources management. And then I got my MBA as well. I worked there for a little bit, and then I worked at Booth School, Chicago Booth School of Business at their MBA office. And then after that, I finally landed a position in career services where I actually wanted to spend the rest of my career in, which was here at Hawkeye Community College. So this is my journey in snapshots, if you want to say.
That's a great career history. That's like so exciting. You were like on the innovation level at your university in Egypt, it sounds like, of career services.
Yes, it was good. It's good to start. It was good a student activity to start, and it's actually still going right now. And now the focus has shifted from like in-person events to more of a virtual events, and also more of encouraging students to take like other certifications and stuff like that from other education institutions, like Coursera gives like small courses and certificates that's more accredited nationwide or worldwide even. So yeah.
Interesting. All right, well, thanks for joining us today from Hawkeye.
My pleasure.
Let's dive into the topic of networking and dining etiquette. What are just some of your best tips about how to network?
Yes, sure thing. So some of the tips that I have in mind, well, let's talk about the purpose of networking first. Well, you are basically planting the seed to help yourself open up. more opportunities later on in the future, right? Job opportunities, that is. And if we are talking about networking, it's simply, it involves three simple steps. First, telling your story. Second, finding people in your existing network that kind of connects you to your career path and makes it easier for you, finding that opportunity, right? And then reaching out to these people in your network, whether that to be in LinkedIn or in your family, in your friends, in professional associations that you're part of, student organizations that you're part of, right? And you do it every day, right? We do establish relationships every day. It all counts and it all helps, but you just got to be more intentional about it. The way you start about networking in a way that's intentional is basically you got to understand also what career path that you want to be involved at. And then that way you can be intentional about creating relationships that will help you later on in the future about understanding what's going on in the market of your career path and how can you find an easy job, an internship, or part-time job in the field. And then hopefully later on when you graduate from college, also land a full-time job as well.
Those are great, easy steps. Thanks for laying that out for us.
My pleasure.
So it's easy to understand. So if you want to
Yes.
start a conversation with someone to do some networking, what are some topics that you might want to bring up? And are there certain things maybe you don't want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, as I mentioned, in terms of networking, it could be a scary word for some people, but you do it every day. We establish relationships, we start conversations almost every day. So it's as simple as, okay, you're in a networking event. Some topics could be, oh, it's pretty nice today. You can talk about the weather. It's an easy and simple way to start a conversation. Another one could be simple is, so what brought you here today, right? Some of these questions just simply gets the person talking first, and then now that you get to know about the other person, is it a recruiter or somebody who can benefit you later on in your life in terms of your career path, right? Get to know them better, and then kind of put yourself in a position where you can tell them also about yourself, talking about your elevator speech. And if you don't know what's an elevator speech, basically a speech that you can tell to someone in an elevator in that quick journey from the first floor to the, let's say, the fifth floor, and they will understand who you are and how can you benefit them and how they can benefit you, right? So in another one that you can, another conversation starter that you could start with is talking about the space, the food, a workshop that you were just part of, a panel discussion that you both were attending, right? Oh, how did you hear about this event? What a beautiful venue that they chose. I like it. And then you can talk about things, and then you move on with the purpose of your conversation, which is kind of establishing a good relationship where this person could be of a benefit for you in your career path. Have you been here before? Talking about the venue that you are at right now, so talking about the space or the food. Oh, I like the salad. I think they have a really good dressing. I wonder what kind of dressing that you're using, right? So that's a good, talking about the food is a good way to start as well. If you're feeling a little, you're more of an outgoing person like myself, you can go, oh, so what's your story? I think this question, it's a good one. It kind of always sparks a fascinating and non-generic conversation that's kind of not relative necessarily to what you both are doing. Like what I talked about this morning. I talked about my passion for my career and where did that passion come from, and why I'm here and what I'm doing. So kind of gives you an idea of how can you establish that relationship with the person that you're talking about. If you're even feeling more bold, you can even throw a joke right there. One that I used before is, excuse me, do you know how much a polar bear weighs? And if the person says no, then enough to break the ice. And then now you broke the ice, and you can say, okay, hi, my name is Andy, and or my name is Yusuf, and nice to meet you. Let's talk a little bit what brought you here and all of that, right? You dive right into the conversation. So these are some good conversation starters and topics to focus on and talk about. Some stuff that you need to avoid is, I would say, political stuff. Current events and things that happen, that's happening around us that could be of a conflict of interest or whatnot. You don't necessarily need to talk about your personal life. You're trying to establish a relationship with somebody in a professional level. You don't necessarily have to share all of that. You don't want to talk about your personal finances, family, or relationship issues. I definitely would stay away from gossip, right? Especially if it's work related and whatnot. So these are just a few topics to help you start a good conversations, and a few topics to avoid when you're starting these conversations.
And you're so correct. Everyone likes to talk about their career path. And I think that's on the other end, something people are really interested in. Like, how did you get to this really interesting thing that you do now?
Yep.
So we always try to, I know in a lot of events we try to get that career story.
Yep.
So it's a great way to start those conversations. So if you're at an event, you talked about food too. Let's talk about the food.
Yep.
Are there certain foods, say you have a choice of things you can eat at an event, it's a professional setting. Are there certain choices you can make as to what you should eat that are better than other choices?
Yeah, it's you are going to be in a professional setting, so think about what is the setting? Is it a professional meeting? Is it an event where it's casual and you can have casual conversations here and there? So you just got to be conscious about that. Am I going to be involved in a lot of conversations, and not going to be really focusing as much on the food? Just be conscious about your choices in the meeting, when it comes to the meeting that you're going to be part of, right? I would always try to order or get some food that's easy to eat, right? Finger foods or something that's easy. You can pick it with a fork right away, right? Especially let's say pasta, for example. Pasta could be challenging sometimes and could be messy when you eat it. So you just try your best to avoid food that could be messy when you eat it. It's okay to pick it, but as long as you know how to eat it in a manner that's not gonna be messy or get your clothes not clean or whatnot, you get your clothes dirty, right? Also, some of the etiquettes that I would advise is eat slowly. Just cut only a few small bites, or a little pieces, and just portion your meal. It chews your mouth goals. I've seen it a lot in business meetings where some people would chew their mouth open or even talk while they are eating. I would advise against that. Don't talk while you're eating. If somebody asks you a question and you have to wait a couple of seconds before you start speaking until you chew the food, please just chew your food and then go on and speak more, or answer that question, right? When you pass items, it's always good to pass it to the right, right? When you pass items to somebody during the meal, especially if it's a portion like in a professional setting. And also another thing is, if you are in a table, let's say there is a host for that table or this place, they are always the person in charge. Don't try to move things around or ask for things to happen, right? If there is somebody who's hosting that event, the hostess should be the one who's in charge, right? Another thing that I would advise the students is, you should never say that you're going to the bathroom, right? If you want to excuse yourself for a legitimate reason, then just say excuse me and leave the table, and that will people understand, yeah. So these are just some things to keep in mind when you are choosing your food, and some things to keep in mind as you're eating, or having a conversation with somebody in the table, where you are all sharing food and it's in a professional setting.
Well, thank you so much for contributing to this session, Yusuf. We really, really appreciate it. So on behalf of the Iowa Intermediary Network, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you all for your time. I'm going to throw it back to Christine to wrap up our session here.
Yes, thank you all for your insight at today's event, and thank you to our viewers for joining us. We really appreciate you joining for today's Meals and Mingling Network and Dining Etiquette event, sponsored by the Iowa Work-Based Learning Coordinators and the Iowa Intermediary Network. Thanks, everyone.